Hello and welcome. I'm Rawia Alami and this is the Dailies, where we take a look at important news stories, reports, analysis and articles published in newspapers and media outlets across the world. Newspapers continue to focus on President Trump's new position on the war in Ukraine, as well as former President Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis. Many papers also reported on the recent shared statement of the UK, France, and Canada regarding Israeli military operations in Gaza and its humanitarian plan in the Strip, with many describing it as a turning point in the European position. Britain has suspended trade negotiations with Israel, while the EU pledged to reconsider its commercial ties with Tel Aviv. The UK, France, and Canada also threatened in their statement to impose sanctions on Israel if it does not cease military operations in Gaza and allow humanitarian aid to enter the Strip. The Financial Times, for one, published an interview with UNRWA chief Philip Lazzarini on Israel's new aid delivery plan for Gaza. Lazzarini criticized the plan and warned that such a plan, which requires Palestinians to travel to Israeli-controlled distribution points for aid, could indeed facilitate forced displacement, a potential war crime. He argues that the scheme violates basic humanitarian principles and also risks using aid as a tool for military and political purposes. Israel claims the plan is needed to prevent aid diversion to Hamas, but Lazzarini insists it will worsen Gaza's humanitarian crisis and could lead to famine. The article highlights mounting international pressure on Israel to lift restrictions and allow more effective, impartial aid distribution in Gaza. And we'll stay in the Middle East, but we'll move to The Guardian, where Owen Jones wrote a column reviewing a growing sense of reckoning among British politicians and the public over the UK's response to the crisis in Gaza. It highlights recent parliamentary interventions questioning the government's legal and moral responsibility for failing to prevent atrocities, as well as calls for tougher action against Israel. The article criticizes both Labour and Conservative leaders for their limited measures and past support for Israeli policies, arguing that these actions may be judged harshly in history. It also notes that the shift that happened in tone, with even longtime supporters of Israel expressing regret and concern. Ultimately, the article contends that the UK's reluctance to fully confront Israel's actions will be remembered as complicity in a major historical crime, as warnings of humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza continue to mount. The change in position of the UK, France and Canada towards Israel and the tougher language used by these countries, who threatened sanctions against Israel if it does not halt its military actions in Gaza and ease aid restrictions, indeed caused quite a stir in Israel, as expected. The Jerusalem Post, in its editorial today, criticized these countries for ignoring the role of Hamas and Iran in the conflict. The editorial highlights Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu's defense that Israel is acting to free hostages and ensure national security, and notes his frustration that Western allies are not pressuring Hamas or even Iran. The piece argues that by focusing their criticism on Israel, these countries risk encouraging Hamas and overlooking the broader context of terrorism and regional threats, calling for a more balanced approach. The New York Times published an analysis on its front page about the recent developments in the peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. The analysis delves into the aftermath of a recent call between President Trump and President Putin, revealing that hopes for a swift peace in Ukraine are fading. Despite Trump's earlier promises to end the war quickly, his latest conversation with Putin marked a shift. Trump now supports direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, stepping back from US pressure on Moscow. The analysis highlights that this move is seen as a diplomatic win, of course, for Putin, who continues to insist on peace only on his terms, while Russia gains ground on the battlefield. The piece notes that the US and European support remains critical for Ukraine, but uncertainty over future American aid and sanctions relief leaves Kiev vulnerable. Meanwhile, Russia's economy is strained by sanctions, but Putin appears willing to wait, believing time is on his side. And we'll stay with the New York Times, where Patty Davis, who is the daughter of the late American President Ronald Reagan, wrote an article arguing that after his cancer diagnosis, former President Joe Biden has a chance to do something astounding. The author reflects on the impact of public figures sharing serious health diagnoses, comparing her father, Ronald Reagan's openness about Alzheimer's to Joe Biden's recent announcement of prostate cancer. The author notes as well how Reagan's honesty helped indeed break the stigma around Alzheimer's and gave comfort to others facing similar struggles. Now, Biden has a chance to show leadership by speaking openly about his diagnosis, also moving beyond politics to connect with people on a human level. The article suggests that Biden's vulnerability could help restore trust and bring comfort to millions dealing with illnesses and fear. It argues that true leadership sometimes means sharing personal challenges, reminding us that all people, leaders included, are both fragile and strong. The Washington Post published an editorial today relating to President Biden's diagnosis, as well examining the timing of the announcement, public sympathy and suspicions about whether Biden and his team concealed his health issues during his presidency. The editorial reviews the public and political fallout from Joe Biden's announcement of aggressive prostate cancer, connecting it to ongoing concerns about his cognitive decline as detailed in the new book, Original Sin. While the author acknowledges Biden's long service, the article argues that the presidency demands exceptional mental and physical health. It criticizes Biden's inner circle for hiding his struggles, suggesting his secrecy undermined public trust and the democratic process. The editorial board calls also for greater transparency about a president's health, proposing regular cognitive testing and public reporting. The piece concludes that both parties and Congress should ensure future presidents are fully capable so voters can make informed choices and avoid similar crises of confidence. The Wall Street Journal published a report on its front page detailing how Google is taking aim at AI firms and challenging its search dominance. The report reviews Google's bold overhaul of its search engine with the introduction of AI Mode, a chatbot-style feature designed to counter competition from AI rivals like ChatGPT. The new mode, powered by Google's Gemini AI, allows users to interact with search results in a conversational way, moving beyond the traditional list of blue links. The article notes that this shift comes indeed as Google faces declining search traffic, especially on Apple devices, and growing pressure from investors and regulators. The report explains that by integrating advanced AI capabilities directly into the search, Google hopes to maintain its dominance in the face of changing user habits and intensifying competition. The review highlights that this is Google's most ambitious response yet to AI-driven transformation of online search. And we'll end with Le Monde, where Eric Albert reviews in his column the recent shifts in U.S. trade policy under President Trump, focusing on his abrupt imposition and partial suspension of steep tariffs on global imports. Despite some concessions, such as suspending tariffs on China and also reaching a deal with the UK, US tariffs remain at their highest average level since the 1930s. Now at 14%, the article notes that these measures have created uncertainty in global trade, with experts warning of possible recession and rising consumer prices in the US. The UK, despite hailing its agreement as historic, faces higher tariffs on most exports to the US. The article concludes that Trump's unpredictable approach has fundamentally changed the rules of global trade, with more volatility likely ahead. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.